POV, it's 2010, you're 13 years old, and you're playing Pokemon Black or White. You walk into the Electric Gym in Nimbasa City with your trusty ground type, and then you see this. That is Emolga, a Pokemon that's both electric and flying type, meaning it's immune to those ground moves you were going to use against it. If you're lucky, you have some rock moves to hit them with, but you'll have to survive a few Volt Switches and Aerial Aces first. This subversion of type expectation is what makes Elisa one of the standout gym leaders in Generation 5, and I've always wondered why so few other gyms do stuff like that. I mean, sure, you have Claire in Generation 2, and Whitney's Miltank having Scrappy in Heart Gold and Soul Silver is definitely a surprise, but most of the time, you can beat gym leaders by simply spamming a super effective move. It's cool that gym leaders have these type specialties, as it gives them a lot of personality and flair, but those type specialties are often what leads them to being boxed into bad teams. But as we all know, Pokemon can have up to 2 types, and Elisa and Claire show us that good type combinations can really bring the difficulty up. What if Pokemon gyms didn't have just 1 type specialty, but 2? In this video, I'll be making a set of 8 gym leaders, each with a dual type specialty, with no overlapping types. I'll pick abilities, items, and moves, and just for fun, I'll be picking a trainer from the series who I think would be a good fit to lead a gym of that type combo. I'll pick an ace that is of both types, and the remaining Pokemon will only need to have one of the 2, allowing us to fill the remaining spots with a lot of coverage types. And if you're doing your math, you'll notice that 8 gyms of 2 types each make 16 types, leaving a perfect 2 left over. Stick around to the end of the video to see how we make sure these 2 types still get used. Now, the question is really how to decide which types get paired together. With 306 combinations to pick, we've got to whittle out a few. The first thing we can do is get rid of any types that have a 4 times weakness, as that would lead to the same type of spamming problem we have with the monotype gyms. We want to pick type combinations that are defensively complementary, covering each other's weaknesses with resistances, and that can also hit a lot of types for at least neutral damage. With all that, let's get into the first gym leader. Looking at the first gyms across the series, there's definitely a trend. Rock and Bug make up 5 of the first gyms out of the 8 generations that have them, so I think they'd make for a great type combination for our first gym. The 2 types hit 7 types for super effective damage, 9 for neutral damage, and only 2 for not very effective damage, one of them being Steel, which isn't very common in the early game. Likewise, the only weaknesses remaining are to Steel, again, uncommon in the early game, Rock, and Water. We'll start the battle off with the monotype rock Pokemon, Rockruff. He'll have the ability Keen Eye. We'll give him Rock Tomb as a solid stab move, but Stealth Rock as well, which will keep the player on their toes for the battle. Finally, for some coverage, we'll give him Bulldoze for Rock and Steel types and Trailblaze for Water types. Moving on, our second Pokemon will be Joltik, a Bug and Electric type. He'll have the ability Unnerve to stop the player from using any berries on their Pokemon that might be a little lower health by now, and Bug Bite to pair with it. Of course, he'll know Electro Web to slow down his opponents, with Absorb for some extra coverage against rock types. His last move will be Struggle Bug. Lastly, there were a couple options available for this gym's ace, but I think the best one is Anorith. Anorith has an attack stat of 95, which is pretty high for a first gym, but well under Rourke's Cranidos' stat of 125. Its defensive stats aren't amazing, but its battle armor ability will protect it from critical hits, and we'll give it a Citrus Berry for some extended HP. We'll give it the moves Smackdown and Fury Cutter for some powerful stab attacks, especially with Fury Cutter's compounding damage. We'll give it Aqua Jet to handle rock types, and Withdraw for some extra defense. Overall, I think this is a pretty solid team, but could easily be beaten by just bringing a few Pokemon of diverse types. For the leader, I think I'll go with Berg. He's already a bug specialist, and he's used the Crustle line before, another rock and bug type Pokemon. For the next gym, I went and picked the classic we brought up earlier, Electric and Flying. Electric only has one weakness, Ground, which Flying is immune to, and since Electric resists itself, Flying is left only being weak to Rock and Ice, which aren't terribly common attacking types. Offensively, the type combo is pretty good too, hitting 5 types for super effective damage, 12 for neutral, and only 1 electric for not very effective damage. Our first pick for this battle will be one to combat the rock and ice weaknesses, the electric fighting type Pommo. We could do a Pomot since there isn't a level requirement for that evolution, but I think Pommo's stats fit the second gym vibe a little bit better. We'll give Pommo its evolution move, Arm Thrust, for some fighting stab damage, along with Thunder Fang for some electric stab. For some further coverage, we'll give it Bite for handling psychic types and Metal Claw for fairy types. Its Volt Absorb ability will also give it an immunity to any electric types that the player might try to use against this team's flying type Pokemon. Speaking of which, I feel like Corvisquire deserves a spot on this team as it is one of the only pure flying types in the whole series. With Keen Eye to prevent accuracy drops, we'll give him Pluck for a stab attack and Rock Smash for coverage. It'll have Home Claws to get its attack up, and Tailwind to up its speed and set up our ace, Kilowattrel. Being a slightly bulkier, harder hitting, and faster version of Emolga, Kilowattrel is the perfect ace for this team. It's got the Volt Absorb ability to block all electric type attacks, and will give it heavy duty boots to avoid any Stealth Rock strats that the player might have picked up from the last gym. To take advantage of our high speed and the Tailwind that Corvisquire set up, we'll give it Electro Ball, which does more damage the faster Kilowattrel is than its opponent, and agility to raise its speed even further. Pair this with Thunder Wave to paralyze and half the speed of the opponent, and give it Air Slash as a flying stab move, and I think we've got a pretty good ace. Elisa might seem like a good fit for this team since she's rocked the type combo before, but I think Skyla, being a pilot, might be a better fit for a team centered around the combination of Tailwind and Electro Ball. Hey, if you're enjoying the video so far, consider liking and subscribing. This is my first video on YouTube and I'm trying to get to 1,000 subscribers. Thanks and enjoy the rest of the video. Next up, I want to get the normal type out of the way early. When thinking about what type to combine it with, only a few came to mind. Normal isn't super effective against any other types in the game, so it can't really help out a team offensively, other than hitting for neutral damage. However, its immunity to Ghost comes in handy. This led me to pick the elusive Normal and Ghost combination for the third gym. Ghost is immune to Normal's weakness to fighting, and Normal is immune to Ghost's weakness to itself, leaving only Dark as a weakness. Offensively, the types hit only 2 types for super effective damage, but they hit all remaining 16 for neutral damage. We'll start this team off with a Persian with the ability Technician, raising the power of its move that have a base power of 60 and below. Fake Out seems like a good way to start the battle, with Swift for some consistent normal stab damage. We'll give it Thief for some Ghost coverage and Pain Split, as it just seems like a move that fits the vibe of the team. Next, we'll move into a Drifblim, whose role on the team is to be a bit of a wall. We'll give him a Leftovers and Protect combo for some free healing every other turn, and Will-O-Wisp to go with it for chip damage. Air Slash and Shadow Ball will make for some great stab moves. Finally, its Aftermath ability will do some extra damage before it faints. Third, we'll throw out a Wigglytuff, whose secondary fairy typing will help us against our only weakness of Dark. The Cute Charm ability could lead our opponents to becoming infatuated, and we'll give it Sweet Kiss to add a chance for confusion. With Round and Dazzling Gleam for some stab damage, we'll finish off the moveset with Reflect, which should help out our ace defensively. Speaking of that ace, it will of course be Hisuian Zoroark, the only eligible Pokemon for this type combination. We'll switch things up for this battle by having the leader randomize which Pokemon is in the back of the party to take advantage of Zoroark's illusion ability, changing it to appear as that Pokemon. We'll give it U-turn for a quick escape when its illusion fails, and that will double as a good move against Dark types. Then we'll give it Shadow Ball and Hyper Voice for stab attacks. Lastly, we'll give it Facade to take advantage of any burns left over from Drifblim. For an item, I wasn't really sure for this moveset, but I thought a King's Rock might be fun, since the movesets for this team have sort of centered around stalling. For a leader, I'll go with Morty. He's already a Ghost type specialist, but also kind of seems like a normal guy. I think it's the Scarf. Our fourth team will use the Grass-Fire type combination. Fire was actually a pretty difficult type to combine, as 8 of the combinations it could have had have 4 times weaknesses, and 2 of those are limited to single forms of a Pokemon. However, pairing it with Grass seems to work really well. Fire covers Grass's weaknesses of Bug, Ice, and Fire, and Grass covers Fire's weaknesses of Ground, Water, and Rock. Offensively, the combination hits 7 types for super effective damage, 9 for neutral damage, and only 2 for not very effective damage. An obvious motif for this team is to use Sun. So we'll start it off with Torkoal, whose ability Drought will set it up for free. We'll give it a Heat Rock as well to keep the Sun up for 8 turns instead of 5. We'll give it the move Lava Plume for some Sun boosted stab and a chance for burn, and Ancient Power for some coverage against any flying Pokemon who threaten our Grass Pokemon. Lastly, we'll give it Smoke Screen to lower accuracy and Rapid Spin to remove any hazards the player might have set up. Next, we'll send out a Toedspool with the hopes to put our opponent to sleep with a 100% accurate Spore. It's guaranteed to move after our opponent thanks to the ability Mycelium Might, but it will work regardless of the opponent's ability. Mudshot and Solar Beam will be good stab options, with Solar Beam only taking 1 turn if the player fails to remove the Sun, and Hex will be a good move to take advantage of any burns that Torkoal might have caused. Thirdly, we'll send out a Carkol, which will protect us from flying types and at least give us some coverage for water with the Steam Engine ability. With Flame Charge and Ancient Power as stab moves, we'll round off the moveset with Incinerate to burn berries and Scorching Sands to cover rock types and have a chance at leaving a burn. For our ace, we'll use the only Pokemon available, Scovillain. Scovillain's stats aren't exactly the highest they could be, but with its ability Chlorophyll, it will benefit from a huge speed boost. We'll give it Sunny Day and a Heat Rock to set up the sun if it needs to again, and then Flamethrower and Solar Beam as stab attacks. Finally, we'll give it Zen Headbutt to cover poison types. For a leader for this gym, there are a lot of fire type and grass type gym leaders, but I feel like we obviously have to go with Chili from Unova. How could we not? Moving into the 5th gym, I went with Psychic and Fighting. I think this is generally just a cool typing that fits together not just mechanically, but also in terms of aesthetics. Something about the types that represents bronze and brains coming together is just really pleasing. Defensively, Fighting takes care of Psychic's dark weakness and provides a resistance to Bug, while Psychic, of course, provides a resistance to itself. This leaves Ghost, Fairy, and Flying as weaknesses, but we should be able to handle these with the versatility of the Fighting type. Offensively, the type combination hits 7 types for super effective damage, a whopping 10 for neutral, and only does not very effective damage to Psychic. For our first Pokemon, we'll send out a Galarian Slowking to give us some coverage for Fairy Pokemon. Since it has a very low speed stat, I thought I'd give it Trick Room. This will be used by half the Pokemon on the team, which also seems fitting for the whole Brain-Brawn duality theme going on. For some stab moves, we'll give it Eerie Spell to lower the opponent's PP, and Sludge Bomb for a chance to poison. We'll finish off Slowking with Drain Punch for coverage against dark types and some health longevity. Next up will be Farigiraf, the long-awaited evolution of Girafarig. Its slower speed will benefit from Trick Room, and its ability Armor Tail will keep the player from using any priority moves to get around it. We'll give it its signature move Twin Beam for some stab, but we'll forgo any normal stab in favor of coverage. We'll give it Dazzling Gleam to ward off Fighting and Dark-type Pokemon, and Shadow Ball for Ghosts. Lastly, we'll give it Confuse Ray. The third Pokemon on this team will be Hitmonchan with the ability Iron Fist. We'll give him Bullet, Drain, and Ice Punch for priority, stab, and coverage that all benefit from his ability, and then Knock Off to hit ghosts and remove items. Fourth, we'll send out Hawlucha with the ability Limber. Its Fighting Flying typing keeps it safe from a lot of types that threaten this team. It'll have Brick Break and Dual Wing Beat for stab, as well as getting around some defensive strats the player might be using, and Rock Slide and X Scissor for coverage. Finally, the ace of this team will be Gallade with the ability Sharpness. Sacred Sword will be a good move to bypass changes to the opponent's stats, and Poison Jab will handle fairy types. Night Slash will counter ghost types, and finally, Zen Headbutt will provide some good psychic stab with a chance for flinching. I think a cool item for Gallade would be the weakness policy, raising its attack stats when it's hit by a super effective move. For this team's leader, I think we could go with Wally. He's got a Gallade already in the Gen 3 remakes, and I think him ending up as a gym leader would be a great epilogue for his character arc. Moving on to Gym 6, I went with the Fairy and Steel types. These both seem like late game gym types to me, and the type combination is quite good. Steel is immune to poison and resists itself, which are Fairy's only 2 weaknesses, and Fairy is good against fighting, which is one of the only things Steel needs to worry about. Offensively, it deals super effective damage to 6 types, neutral to 10, and not very effective only to Steel and Fire. That being said, we'll start off with Steelix, a ground type who can handle our offensive shortcomings. We'll give it the Sturdy ability so it can't be taken out by a simple Surf, and then we'll give it Sandstorm to raise its special defense. Earthquake and Heavy Slam will make for some great stab moves, especially with Steelix's weight being so high, and then Ice Fang will help us against any ground types that threaten us. For our second Pokemon, I think Berserker makes for a great fit on this team. Pure Steel is a good type, and I like its ability Tough Claws, which increases damage on contact moves. We'll give it Screech and Iron Head for a good stab combo, and then Play Rough and Seed Bomb for fighting and ground coverage. Third, we'll go into Whimsicott with Prankster and Leech Seed for some guaranteed lifesteal. Giga Drain will help with that, and Moonblast will give us some more stab power. Finally, I think Psychic makes for good coverage against poison types who threaten Whimsicott with a 4x weakness. After a Grass Fairy Pokemon, we'll go into the Water Fairy Pokemon Azumarill, who with the huge power ability is a force to be reckoned with. We'll give it Aqua Tail and Play Rough for stab moves, with Ice Spinner and Bulldoze for coverage, with the added benefit of Ice Spinner removing any hazards for our ace. The ace of this gym will of course be Tinkaton, a new fairy steel type introduced in Scarlet and Violet. Its attack stat is a little wanting, so we'll give it Swords Dance to get it up quickly. Gigaton Hammer and Play Rough will be good stab moves, and finally we can give it Rock Slide to take out any fire types that threaten it. Jasmine feels like a good fit for this team, as she's a steel type specialist but still has a whimsical feel about her. For Gym 7, we'll be going with a type combination I fell in love with early on in the planning of this video, Ice and Ground. Offensively, this type combination is amazing. It can hit 9 types for super effective damage, 10 if you use Freeze Dry, and then it hits all the remaining for neutral damage. In fact, if you use Freeze Dry, there are only 2 Pokemon in existence who resist this type combination, Snom and Frostmoth, and I don't really think we need to worry about those. Defensively, Ice covers Ground's weaknesses to itself and Grass, while Ground covers Ice's weaknesses to Steel, Fire, and Rock. Now that we're in the 7th gym, we'll start things out a bit harder with Torterra to handle any water types that the opponent might have brought with them. It'll have Earthquake, Seed Bomb, and Giga Drain for stab moves, and Zen Headbutt to hit fighting and poison types. After that, we'll send out Gallade with Snowscape, Ice Body, and an Ice Rock to take full advantage of the snow weather effect, doubling its physical defense. We'll give it Frost Breath for some free critical hits, Freeze Dry to hit water types, and Water Pulse to hit rock, ground, and fire types. Next, we'll switch in Excadrill, which is probably one of the best ground type Pokemon. Its ability won't really come into play here, but we'll give it Drill Run, Smart Strike, and Stomping Tantrum for some stab moves. Finally, we can give it Aerial Ace for a coverage move against fighting types that never misses. Next, we'll send out Alolan Ninetales with Snowscape and an Icy Rock to set up the snow again. To pair with this, we'll have it use Aurora Veil to give it and its ace even more bulk, and the Snow Cloak ability to boost evasiveness. It'll know Moonblast and Blizzard for stab with snow boosted accuracy. The ace of this team will of course be Mamoswine, the only fully evolved ground and ice type Pokemon. It'll also have the Snow Cloak ability, and then a moveset of Avalanche, Freeze Dry, Earthquake, and Rest for some HP recovery. We'll give it a Chesto Berry for 1 free rest. It feels like it goes without saying that this team should be led by Price, since he uses the Mamoswine line on his own teams already. For our final gym, I'm taking a page out of Johto's book and going with the Water Dragon combination. Defensively, this typing is insane. Being only weak to Fairy and Dragon, the 2 types cover each other's weaknesses so well. Offensively, it hits 4 types for super effective damage and the rest for neutral damage. First off, we really need to cover our Fairy weakness, so we'll send out the Steel Dragon type Drillbur. We'll give it the ability Heavy Metal to pair with Heavy Slam, doubling its weight, but we'll still give it Flash Cannon and Dragon Pulse for some special attacking stab. Finally, we'll give it Mirror Coat to reflect any Dazzling Gleams or Moonblasts it might encounter. Next, we'll switch to the Water type and send out Basculegion. The Water Ghost combo hits all types for at least neutral damage, so its ability Adaptability will be a huge help here. We'll give it Rain Dance and a Damp Rock to set up the weather, and then Waterfall and Phantom Force for some stab physical moves. Finally, we'll teach it Scale Shot as a dragon move, but we'll want to use it sparingly so we don't lose all our defense. Next, we'll throw out another dragon type who's not weak to Fairy, Dragalge. With the ability Poison Point, we might get away with getting some chip damage in. Sludge Bomb and Dragon Pulse will make for good stab moves, with Rain Boosted Surf matching the team's type combo, and Haze to reset any stat changes before the ace comes out. After that, we'll send out Walrein. It will have Surf, Ice Beam, and Bulldoze to hit Grass, Ice, and Electric types all for at least neutral damage, but then we'll also give it Rain Dance and another Damp Rock in case it needs to set up the rain again for the ace. And the ace for this gym will of course be Dracovish. Kingdra was tempting with that 540 base stat total, but I thought Dracovish would just be a fresh take. Obviously, we'll be giving it its signature move, Vicious Rend, and the Strong Jaw ability to go with it. We'll give him a Quick Claw as well to get that damage boost off a few times, as Vicious Rend does double damage when it moves first. We'll also give it Dragon Pulse because it doesn't learn Dragon Rush until level 77, and Brine for additional stab moves, and Iron Head will be some good protection against fairies. For the leader of this gym, Claire feels like a good fit, but I think Drayden from Blueberry Academy might be even better. It'd be cool to see him as a gym leader. If you've stuck around the video for this long, first of all, thank you, but secondly, you might remember that there are still 2 types left out of the 18 total. If you've been crossing them off, you'll know that the last remaining type combo is Dark Poison, and I think this would make for a perfect evil team leader. The type combination only takes super effective damage from ground, as Dark covers Poison's weakness to Psychic, and Poison hits Fairy for double damage and has resistances to Fighting and Bug. Offensively, it only hits 4 types for super effective damage, but it hits the remainder for neutral. For the first Pokemon, we'll right some of the wrongs that Scarlet and Violet committed and start off with the Glimmora with the ability Toxic Debris. We'll give it Spikes and Stealth Rock to be extra evil to our opponent, and then Power Gem and Sludge Bomb for some stab moves. With all those hazards out, our opponent is likely to use Rapid Spin to get rid of them, so we'll send out the Ghost Dark type Spiritomb to block it. Of course, moves like Mortal Spin and Ice Spinner could still be used, but this strategy just feels perfect for an evil team. We'll give Spiritomb the moves Hex and Dark Pulse for stab attacks that can take advantage of any poisoned Pokemon on the player's team, Psychic for a chance to deal super effective damage to fighting type Pokemon, and Pain Split to finish things off. Next up, we'll send out Rose Raid with the Poison Point ability. We'll give it Venom Drench to lower the stats of poison Pokemon, Sludge Bomb and Energy Ball for stab moves, and Spikes to reset some hazards if they've been removed. Fourth, we'll use Honchkrow, which is just the perfect Pokemon for an evil team leader. We'll give it Night Slash, Foul Play, and Acrobatics for stab moves, and then give it Confuse Ray to even things out. Finally, we'll use the Hisuian Pokemon Overquill for an ace, as it's the Poison Dark Pokemon with the highest base stat total. It'll have the Poison Point ability and will hold Black Sludge for some healing. We'll give it Haze to remove any stat changes that might have been set up, and Barb Barrage to deal extra damage to poison Pokemon. With Crunch and Poison Jab as additional stab moves, I think that makes for a pretty good team. As for which evil team leader would fit this team, I think I'd have to go with Team Galactic's Cyrus, as the team sports a couple of Gen 4 Pokemon and even uses a Hisuian Pokemon as its ace. He's also known to use a lot of Dark and Poison type Pokemon in the Gen 4 games. So that's it! 9 teams, each using 2 type specialties to cover all 18 types. I'd really love to see something like this in a Pokemon game or a ROM hack, even if it's just one gym. If you liked the video, feel free to subscribe and help me build a base, as this is my first video. Comment down other type combinations you think might be interesting, and I'll catch you in the next one.